Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Collar here. And look, we don't have any definitive reporting. I'm just going to come out and say it. There is no definitive reporting today about what is going to happen with the Minnesota Vikings, but there are rumors. And so long as there are rumors, then we will be here on Purple Insider to talk about those rumors and also your thoughts on what is next for the Vikings at their quarterback position. Also, they missed out on L'Jarius Sneed, who was not really traded for all that much. I want to talk a little bit about that. And I have ranked the outcomes. I got enough emails asking for pie charts, asking for rankings. So I have made a top 5 outcomes that I think would be best for the Minnesota Vikings heading into the draft with the potential to trade up and all of that is going on now. And look, we might have some movement on this as the owners' meetings get going. So I've got a few things to get to. ESPN, a couple things from them, and something that Dan Quinn said to Tom Pelissero. Then I'll get to my list of the 5 outcomes. So why don't we dive into that right off the bat here? With what Matt Miller wrote for ESPN. He wrote this on ESPN.com, their draft analyst. He says the Vikings sent neither Kwesi Adofo-Mensah nor coach Kevin O'Connell to Michigan for the pro day on Friday, but quarterbacks coach Josh McCown was firmly planted right behind McCarthy during his 25-minute throwing session. In talking to NFL personnel while on the road at pro days this week, the feeling is still that the Vikings will be aggressive in trading up to the number 4 or number 5 spot to land the Michigan quarterback. One general manager I talked to this week said McCarthy is a top 6 pick right now. The question is who will trade up to get him. So that is the feeling of the top ESPN draft analyst from talking to folks around the league. And the interesting thing there, I thought, was the mention of the number 5 pick. Now, we have mostly talked about the number 4 selection of Arizona as being the one that is the most obviously for sale, but have not really discussed too much the number 5 pick. Now, here's one thing I wonder about the number 5 pick in the Vikings. Would Jim Harbaugh hold some bad feelings against the Vikings for not hiring him a couple years ago? Would he be willing to part ways with that pick? So I know that they have a general manager that's not Jim Harbaugh, but let's be honest, when you hire Jim Harbaugh, like that's your guy, right? That's the guy who's calling the shots. And is he going to be okay with a pick swap, or does he not care? Maybe Jim Harbaugh is the type of guy who says no hard feelings. I don't know. He does strike me as the type of person that would hold a grudge, though, if it's based on his competitiveness throughout the years. So I'm not convinced that number 5 is at play if Harbaugh would move with the Vikings, but it does make a lot of sense because the Arizona Cardinals, well, they have said that they are open for business, and Monty Austinfort, their general manager, said that there's a neon sign that says we're open. I still wonder if they want to stick and pick with Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, it's hard to come across wide receiver prospects of this caliber. So would Arizona really want to move back all the way to number 11 and get the 3rd best wide receiver prospect instead of whoever they've been targeting, whether it's Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors? Which one of those guys they want, I don't know. But those are prospects that are considered high above what you usually expect for a top wide receiver. These guys are considered 2 of the best prospects at that position in a long time. So would Arizona want to take themselves out of that conversation? And the Chargers, a lot of people have connected them to offensive linemen like Joe Alt, but I mean, they're in desperate need of wide receivers too. Would they be the team that rather thinking, well, okay, Marvin Harrison Jr. will be off the board, so we could move back instead? It is in play that the Vikings could move up to number 5, but that still leaves the door open. And the reason I don't love it so much for the New York Giants to jump over the Vikings to get their quarterback at number 4. And then the Vikings would be left telling us that they wanted Dallas Turner the whole time, or whoever they would draft with that draft pick at maybe they would have to trade back. I mean, I don't know, trade up to 5, trade back again, or I mean, you can't pick Bo Nix or Michael Penix at that position, right? I mean, they would have to be sure from their intel that the Giants weren't going to be able to move up, but how can you ever really be all that sure? So he mentions number 5. I still think number 4 is the place that the Vikings would like to go. So that was sort of rumor number 1, with Matt Miller saying, hey, the Vikings are still going to be aggressive here. This just after Albert Breer the other day, and we talked quite a bit about that. Albert Breer said, hey, the Vikings have been told polite no's, but polite no in March might not be polite no later on. But the top 3 teams have given them the polite no, which leaves, potentially number 4. So there's still those options on the table, which I wanted to get to from Washington. And this is Dan Quinn talking with Tom Pelissero about whether they would trade up. And this is what Dan Quinn had to say. He says, yes, I would say it's ringing, referring to obviously his phone. And because, like you said, a lot of the talent of the group this year. So I would anticipate fielding these calls as it goes through. And usually it's not necessary later than number 6 or 7, because those are the teams in the top 4 or 5 that somebody, there's somebody that somebody has targeted. And I think it's most likely, well, I've got to take a shot. A lot of times it's a no, like, thanks for calling, but it's part of the process, and you have to do your due diligence to listen and to find out and just make sure, like, there is something that you couldn't refuse. I certainly walked past, and earmuffs, everybody, certainly walked past it in the hallway when I was with the Cowboys years ago, a trade that involved Herschel Walker. It had to come up, right? And many draft picks that changed their organization. So I think anybody in a personnel with the skills of Adam Peters, their general manager, they're going to listen, but there's only so many things you'd consider, and it better be really good. So would Washington think about maybe a deal here where the Vikings move up to 4 and then move up again? Could that be something that's possible? Now, I don't know how much draft capital you could possibly muster, but if you were using number 11 and 23 and then using 2025 first to get up to number 2, that would be if Washington liked, say, JJ McCarthy and didn't like Drake May as much. I mean, there's so many different options here, but that sounded to me like Dan Quinn was saying, yeah, I mean, the door is closed unless you want to open it, but obviously they want a quarterback, so they would not be moving back past number 4. So I have one more thing to read, and then I want to get to L'Jarius Sneed, and then I want to get to my countdown list, and then I'll get to your comments. So this is from Mel Kiper in his most recent mock, and this was transcribed by Vikings.com. Mel Kiper said, the Vikings are now the most interesting team in the draft. They just acquired another first-round pick in the deal from the Texans, giving them the capital to move up and take a quarterback if they got the opportunity. But how far could they move up? Remember, it takes 2 sides to make a trade. Would the Giants at 6 risk missing out on one of the receivers? So he doesn't seem to think that the Giants are taking JJ McCarthy there. Would the Titans at number 7 want to risk missing out on their preferred tackle? Would the Falcons or Bears at number 9 want to risk not getting an edge rusher they like? There's not an easy match unless Minnesota is willing to give up future picks. So that is the note that I wanted to bring up, is if we're talking about having to trade up to 4 and give up a future first, then it becomes a lot to move up for JJ McCarthy potentially. Or, you never know. JJ McCarthy could go number 3 to New England and give the Vikings Drake May or Jaden Daniels. Anyway, Mel Kiper continued, in this scenario, the Vikings could land their quarterback of the future anyway, with Kirk Cousins gone and Sam Darnold added on a 1-year deal. It's clear they have to add competition. All sides point to that competition coming from a rookie. McCarthy is the number 21 prospect on my big board, but I can see why some teams would covet him much higher. He has intriguing physical traits and can make every throw. Either way, if Minnesota really wants to try to move up in round one for a quarterback, I could see them waiting until draft day to see how the board shakes out. Draft day? That's a long time from now. That would be a long time for us to wait and not have resolution on this, whether they were going to trade up if we have to wait all the way until draft day. I will make my best efforts to think of 7,000 different ways to talk about this until we get there. But draft day, that's like a month from now. I want it now, as Homer Simpson might say. So those are the three kind of rumors, all of them pointing to don't give up on the trade up idea. I think Washington is the most far-fetched, but at very least, Dan Quinn is saying, well, I remember the Herschel Walker trade. Thanks for bringing that up, Dan. But when, he's saying like, hey, if you're going to go crazy, then we might let you go crazy. Is crazy 11-23 in next year's first? Probably not, because Washington's going to pick a quarterback. It would require the Vikings to move up and then do something else and then give up, I don't know, another future first or something like that. It doesn't seem that easy to do, but if they were, think about if the Vikings traded up to 4 and then Washington was comfortable with any of the 4 quarterbacks and said, okay, we'll trade down with you and you can have Drake May at number 2 and we'll take JJ McCarthy at number 4, and we'd be watching and tracking the future of that trade for the rest of our existence. That would make for a really fun draft night if all that moving around was happening all at once. Oh my gosh, the draft live stream would implode at that point. YouTube could not handle the amount of hotness that would come from the takes about the Vikings doing that, but not impossible. I think still the most likely scenario remains, in my opinion, them getting to 4 or 5 and then drafting a quarterback there. But because I care so much and I was doing nothing else except for watching basketball today, I decided to make a list of the 5 best outcomes. I ranked them from the one I'd be the least, in support of to the most in support of, or the one that I think would be, from all of these outcomes result in the Vikings getting a quarterback, because I didn't rank the apocalypse. Okay. So we're not ranking the biggest disaster, which would be the Vikings trade up to number 5 and then the Giants jump them and then they don't know what to do like that. I didn't rank that. And all of the rankings, they got a quarterback in the draft. So I'll count them down from 5 to 1. This is just how I see the different possibilities of the Vikings doing this and which ones I think would be the most ideal. So number 5, I have JJ McCarthy being taken at number 4 for number 11, 23, and next year's first round draft pick. Well, I really appreciate the idea of them getting JJ McCarthy if it's their guy and that's who they love so much. That is a lot to give up for a prospect that, as you heard Mel Kiper say, was ranked 21st on his big board and who a lot of the draft universe did not necessarily have at that level until the combine. And I was just talking with my friend Tej Seth from Sumer Sports the other day about players who have sudden rises at the combine. And he had written an article on this. Now, it's not a guarantee that players who have a sudden rise at the combine won't work out, but the odds are different from a player who's locked in as a first round draft pick and then solidifies that all the way through the process versus one who is more of a early second, late first, and then suddenly becomes a top prospect after, or at least by the consensus. I mean, this is by the consensus. We don't know what teams think, but by the consensus mock drafts, there is some correlation to that being a little bit of a red flag. I'm not saying that, he's a bust or whatever. It's just, it raises a bit of an eyebrow when that happens, at least from the data historically. Now that could be to some extent, being wowed by physical traits, which I don't know that was JJ McCarthy. I think McCarthy wowed people, or at least from what it sounds like, in the interview process, in the way he handled the whole thing, and the improvement he showed on some of his throwing technique. That's what it sounds like. Still feels like a lot to give up. 3 firsts versus, or a pick swap and 2 firsts. People get weird about that. But 3 firsts for a first to take JJ McCarthy is a lot in comparison to, say, taking Penix and a defensive player, which is where I went next. Number 4 on my list would be Penix or Bo Nix. You could talk me into either one. I probably lean toward Penix because of his arm strength, but Bo Nix is crazy stat. Bo Nix was sacked like 6 times all of last year. That is wild. There's no offensive line in the world that's good enough to make a quarterback get sacked 6 times. Like, that's on a guy getting rid of the football. Anyway, so Penix or Nix at 11, which seems high for them, but you make sure you get your guy. And then the defensive tackle from Illinois, Johnny Newton, or a cornerback. I mean, whichever one drops. I mean, Quinyon Mitchell is obviously the one who's being talked about the most. Sometimes the most talked about guy doesn't get taken the highest, so I'll throw out his name, or Kool-Aid McKinstry, or is it Terry and Arnold? Like, there's several corners and one might be there. You could certainly talk me into that as opposed to a defensive tackle. I just really have this fixation on the defensive tackle. So this is a good outcome for them to just stick and pick, get a good defensive prospect. And did you reach on the quarterback? Yes. But does that matter that much? Not really, because you ended up getting your guy. So that is a favorable outcome. I have that at number 4. Number 3, I have the switch of that, which is taking one of the elite defensive line prospects, Byron Murphy or Dallas Turner. And, of course, look, I'm going to really lean toward the defensive tackle, but it's not like Andrew Van Ginkel precludes you from taking Dallas Turner. Like, Van Ginkel is a guy who can move around and play a lot of different positions, and he's only on a 2-year deal. So if Turner was there, or Jared Verse, I just wrote Dallas Turner on the list, but Jared Verse or whoever they want, the kid from UCLA, whatever, doesn't matter. One of the top defensive line prospects, and then waiting around. Now, this one I like as an outcome, but at the same time, this is the most scary, I think, because that means you got to wait through the Broncos, through the Raiders. Your intel has to be really good that they are not in love with one of those quarterbacks, because if they are, then you've got yourself a problem. But if they were to come away on draft night with Byron Murphy II and Michael Penix Jr., I mean, you're getting a difference-making, potential game-wrecking defensive tackle and your future quarterback. And is there a risk to that versus, someone you take higher? Yes. But we also, Penix threw for 4,900 yards in 15 games. I mean, he's got the numbers to back it up. He's got the arm talent to back it up. He gets rid of the football. Like, I would be comfortable with that outcome. Number 2 on my list, and this is only supposing that Kevin O'Connell loves JJ McCarthy and that they love him in the interviews, they love him in the workout, and Josh McCown loved what he saw when he went to his pro day. If that's the case, I am assuming in this ranking that Kevin O'Connell wants JJ McCarthy. I do not know that. The draft analysts don't know that. History shows that nobody except for Kevin O'Connell knows that, and he's not going to tell anybody because they don't. But let's just assume that the intel is correct and that the Vikings would be interested in taking McCarthy, as the entire world seems to think. Okay, we'll just assume that for now. That would be number 2 on my list, would be to trade up to 5 and not have to give up the future first. So if they only gave up 11, 25, and let's say a 4th, and we're able to get to 5, and Arizona stuck at 4, took their receiver, and the Vikings took McCarthy at 5, I would say that is a tremendous outcome. You didn't have to wash out the entire future. You only used really to move up to 23. It was just a second-round pick from 2025 and a little change to move up. So you essentially, if this was the outcome, would give up number 11 and a second-round pick from the following year and a little bit of like late draft capital to move up. That's not that much. That's not really very much at all overall. And this would be a tremendous outcome for them because you wouldn't feel like you were throwing the entire draft in the garbage for next year. You're going to want to draft defensive players. You're going to want to draft whatever, offensive linemen, whatever it's going to be for 2025. That is a good outcome. But it's not my number one. My number one is Drake May at 3 or 2, I suppose, no matter what the cost. That is the other way that they could go about this. Still, I think that the New England Patriots might be playing coy a little bit. They might want the Vikings to get to 4 first and then to 2 or 3 to take their guy. But Drake May, to me, is the best fit, the highest ceiling, the guy who you could look at as your franchise quarterback for 10 years that is going to need, some development, but you cannot replace the size, the running ability, the downfield passing, the arm strength, just the perfect fit. And if it costs the farm, it costs the farm because you've already got so much set up in place for Drake May to succeed in the form of Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, and now Aaron Jones in the backfield. If he starts right away, you have 2 former quarterbacks working directly with him. Everything is in place for that guy to become the best version of what he can be. And so that is my number one outcome for this entire thing. Which way it goes, I have no idea. So think about in the chat your reactions. And I see you chattering over there, and I appreciate that. I'll get to you guys in a second. But just one more thing before we get into the chat portion here is L'Jarius Sneed. So the Vikings were reportedly interested early on in the process in L'Jarius Sneed, the cornerback from the Kansas City Chiefs, who played a huge role in them winning the Super Bowl. And the cost was only a 2025 third-round pick, which the Vikings have apparently, I believe, 2 2025 third-round picks, or are we including draft capital is hard to keep track of. Are we including comp picks in that? But maybe they'll get, other, I don't know, whatever. They'll probably get other third-round picks. So they would have had to give up more than that. It would have been obviously that and some change. I don't think the issue for getting L'Jarius Sneed for the Vikings would have been topping the draft capital that the Tennessee Titans gave up. I think it would be the $55 million guaranteed that he immediately signed with the Tennessee Titans, where it was clearly a trade and sign to the Titans, that they had worked that whole deal out before he was even moved. And that's a lot for a corner who, look, he's extremely, extremely good. But, a friend of mine, my accountant, Ralph, who I talk football with all the time, because of course, I've got a financial guy who used to play football in college, and I got an accountant who loves football and played football in high school. So, we keep the team tight knit around ball. Anyway, the point is that his theory, my accountant's theory about cornerbacks, I really like it, and he's going to love that I mentioned it on the show, is that by the time you are realizing how good they are, they're on the other side. So by the time it gets to 2017 and Xavier Rhodes has that incredible year and gets all the hype and everything else, he's probably getting to his peak and is not going to do it again. And so I'm not saying that L'Jarius Sneed wouldn't have been a tremendous addition for the Vikings, but corners can be very risky to lock into long-term deals. They get hurt a lot. They have very up and down types of years. Some years they're amazing. Some years they're not. There are very few corners that have been unbelievable year after year after year. And usually, if that's the case, that means you drafted them like a Patrick Surtain. You drafted them, and then over a couple of years, and that was even the case with Xavier Rhodes, that they became great. So the Vikings not trading for Sneed and not paying 55 guaranteed, it's not that they couldn't have afforded it, and we've talked about that a lot. I just think it was probably the wrong time to do it. Now, they still need cornerback help because I'm not super confident in Shaq Griffin and what they have right now. But I understand why you can wait if you're the Vikings to make this move, especially when you're thinking about sort of now and later stuff. If you get Sneed and then he starts to fall off and you're paying him all this money, and then we've seen this kind of go wrong before. Was it, I don't even remember the guy for the Jets years ago. He had a good year with the Rams, got paid like crazy, and it was a great defense all around. Trent McDuffie was great. Chris Jones is great. Steve Spagnuolo is great. I mean, I think that it's all right even though you're knowing that you're getting all that cap space in the future, it's all right for the Vikings to have said, let's be diligent about how we spend this. There will be other corners that come available in the future. Let's try to get one then that's not going to come off of a Super Bowl season. Plus, also worth mentioning, he played in the Super Bowl, which means he played a lot of extra football games, a lot of mileage on the body. I just think it probably made more sense for the Vikings to not go after L'Jarius Sneed at that price. So there you have it. There is my top 5 list. There's the latest on the rumors. Now tell me what you guys like as your favorite. If you have L'Jarius Sneed reactions, go ahead, but your favorite of the 5. So that's what I want to know from you guys. Locked On Titans. Yeah, I mean, they're going to talk about that, and they're spending all that money. And look, you know what the Titans have done, and I don't really believe in it necessarily, but they drafted their quarterback last year, and now they just paid for Calvin Ridley, Tony Pollard, L'Jarius Sneed. This is you. Like, this is you, right? Like, in the future, in the year 2025, this is you. You don't have to do it this year, but you can certainly do it for next year. So let's see. Andre says number 1 for the win, Drake May by any means. Yeah, I figured that would be most people's favorite. And none of us really know if they love Drake May as much as I think they would. But when we just talk about what someone can be on the highest end, and you compare the profile of Drake May, just the profile of him, the stats that he put up, his numbers dropped a little last year, but the accumulation of his last 2 years is really, really excellent. And he was one of the top, I think maybe he was something like 10th or something in all of college football in PFF grade. And I looked this up. His offensive line ranked 39th in college football and his receivers 55th last year. So not a lot of help. But when we paint the picture of Drake May, we have often seen this player succeed and become very good. Doesn't mean he'll become Josh Allen, but we've seen him become Eli Manning. We've seen him become Matthew Stafford or Carson Palmer pre-injury, but even later in his career, Carson Palmer was great. Like, this guy has failed for sure, but even the worst version of this guy is like Ryan Tannehill. I mean, size and arm talent is a big, big, big deal, and it can overcome a lot. And if they give up a lot to get it, at least we know that the ceiling of this is extremely, extremely high. And if it fails, it fails. If he becomes Blake Bortles, then he becomes Blake Bortles. But, you know, Drake May has been locked into this top draft pick for quite some time. This isn't like a late rise or somebody you have to talk yourself into. This is somebody that takes about 3 seconds of watching him throw the football to be like, that'll work. Yeah, that'll work. Let's see. Invasion likes Byron Murphy the second at 11 and Penix at 23. That's something that I have been talked into more and more because I like Penix, and also because the accumulative value, which is, you know, having a defensive tackle with that type of, that type of ability in the pass rush. I think Byron Murphy had something like 45 pressures and 200 something snaps. I mean, he was just absolutely dominating. That could overall total value, if you got a quarterback that was just good and maybe not even great, but you have a defense that can rank in the top 5 because you create pressure from all areas, you add a corner, you've got great safeties. Like, it all starts to come together in that case. The only problem with that scenario is waiting. Is you draft Murphy at 11, and then you're going, okay, is somebody going to take him? Is somebody going to take him? And then when they, if somebody else takes him, what do you do then? I mean, if somebody takes Bo Nix and Michael Penix before 23, then, oh my gosh, you're just completely out in the cold, and it's going to be terrible. So you don't want that. That is the doomsday scenario that you don't want. And that's why it's hard to just assume that the rest of the league is not as high on Penix enough to draft him at 23. And then I guess also I'd wonder, if nobody else wanted him before then, with QB needy teams, what are you missing? Is there something that you're betting on that they weren't willing to? Eric asks, can the Vikings GM call other GMs to make sure that they can all get their guy they want for each position? You could try. You can most certainly try. I've had that question before. Like, can they call Washington and see if they're going to take Dre May? And you certainly can. You can try. They don't have to tell you though. I don't think that I don't think that Washington would say to the Vikings, "Oh yeah, let me tell you what exactly we're doing so you can manage your plans." They're in the same conference in the NFC. Washington wants to win as much as the Vikings do. So, you know, Juan says, I wouldn't underestimate the fact that Houston reached out with the trade for 23. What this says is that Kwesi took it for the flexibility, not that he took it with another trade established. Yeah, I think that's probably right. But at the same time, the Texans only call you because they know you're looking, right? They call you because they know, hey, the Vikings might want to do this and we want to accumulate more future draft capital. But that doesn't mean that they weren't looking to do it already or that they hadn't already sent a group chat that said, hey, if anybody's got any picks that are in the first round, we'll give up a lot for it. So maybe you could just reach out to us. I mean, I think that the Texans understanding what the Vikings would be looking for and need to trade up probably resulted in them reaching out. So I don't think that doesn't mean that wasn't the Vikings' plan to get another draft pick and try to move up. It just worked out maybe the best for them. Good question from Tracer here. Does Kwesi have a line in the sand on trading like he does player contracts? That I do not know because we only have to judge when it becomes, to the draft that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah likes trading down, but that's not unique. I mean, Baltimore likes to trade down. I think New England used to do that back in the day. Rick Spielman would trade down. Remember when Rick Spielman traded back and back and back and back all the way to I think it was the last pick of the third and took a running back. It was like, huh? Or was it out of the third to take Jalen Holmes? I don't remember. But like a lot of GMs like to trade down when we're not talking about quarterback. When we're talking about quarterback, it's just a totally different story. Throw everything else that you want out of the list, or that I should say. Throw everything else that you know about this GM out when it comes to the quarterback, because the value of hitting on the quarterback is more than whatever other player you draft with a future first round draft pick. It's worth so much in the cap space difference between what you'd have to pay for Kirk Cousins and what you are paying that quarterback, the surplus value of that, the amount of money that they can spend next year. It's just all worth so much to get that quarterback that like you can't really draw a hard line in the sand. I mean, everyone has a line for everything. I mean, if I think I used this example the other night, but like selling a house, but let's flip it around to buying a house. So if you go in, you visit a house, you want it more than anything, and it's listed at $400,000, and you get in a bidding war with somebody and you just keep going up. I mean, there's got to be, all right, we're not paying $520 for a $400,000 house, right? So there has to be, you're not paying X number, like you're not paying 4 firsts for JJ McCarthy, but you might do 3, right? So they have a line in the sand. I'm sure that they're drawing for it, but I think that line is much farther than it was for Kirk. The line in the sand for Kirk was, I don't know, like sometimes I think about the lines in the sand. Some of them are intentional. Some of their lines in the sand are like a fox. I mean, for Kirk, I think it was probably, they did projections to how long they could figure out how good he was going to be based on previous quarterbacks of his age, based on his history, all those types of things, and decided this is how many years we can lock ourselves into. And that was the line in the sand. I think for other guys, it was a polite, yeah, we'll bring you back if you take this terrible contract. Oh, Adam Thielen, you're not going to take it? Sorry, I guess it didn't work out, but we offered you a contract. Like, you always got to do it to just say in public, well, we negotiated, we had something on the table, he decided to go another direction, put it on the player. That's different from this, where it's just, you kind of got to make it happen, hell or high water. So you can't be as rigid. There's just a, hey, if you want us to give up every single draft pick, if you want to go Mike Ditka or Herschel Walker, then maybe that is too much. Ian, I think is how it's pronounced. Rank this U scenario. Vikings trade 3 firsts to get 3, but Washington takes Drake May. They pick JJ over Daniels. How would you feel about this? So that's a tough one because I have this principle when it comes to the draft that I try to stay hardline to, which is that you can't predict how it's going to work out, right? And everything about all the historical analysis that's ever been done says that your draft night opinion does not matter that much, right? That the draft grades, people have studied the draft grades. What's the correlation between draft grade and success of the draft? The answer is almost nothing, right? And maybe reaching on a guy is a little more risky than not, but it's all noisy. There's no real good way to predict it. I think in that case, I would probably be sort of saying this exact same thing through a little bit of gritted teeth because Jaden Daniels is so exciting. He's just, I mean, you look at his performance last year. This guy put up 50 touchdowns. I was looking this up. He averaged 2 more yards per carry than Lamar Jackson as a runner. And that gives you a floor right off the bat that you can be scary as a runner. And look, you've got a great team. He was an accurate passer. He was a really accurate downfield passer. I mean, he kind of has a little bit of everything. And if they took somebody who does not have those super special tools and who's talked about as needing development, and the biggest thing that they're given as their top, asset is that they are a winner, like that would be hard for me to kind of wrap my head around because we've seen so many quarterbacks like Jaden Daniels, the running quarterbacks, only he's the best passer of these guys that we've seen in a long time. And yeah, you could say he had great receivers, but he won the Heisman. I mean, it wasn't like he had great receivers and he threw for 23 touchdowns. I mean, he threw for 40 touchdowns and he averaged 11 yards a pass. When the guy was running play action, he averaged like 12 yards a throw. I mean, it's just wild. And he had great receivers, but you have to throw the ball accurately to those receivers. And he protected the football. He didn't turn it over. He had an incredibly low turnover rate. Like there's so much there that to me says this could be special that I would prefer Daniels. But I also recognize that Daniels might become just a guy. He might become Justin Fields, for example, and JJ McCarthy might fit much better with what Kevin O'Connell wants to do. So that's where the conflict would be for me, because if JJ McCarthy fits better with O'Connell, then the odds of success are higher. And I don't want to use Josh Dobbs as an example because I think that you'd be designing your offense entirely around Jaden Daniels if you draft him. So, and look, that might be their guy. We've kind of assumed that it wasn't, but it might be. I mean, I don't know. Like Kevin O'Connell was a great running quarterback in college, and Josh McCown is an unbelievable athlete when he played. So those guys might love Jaden Daniels. They might be doing all this for Jaden Daniels. I don't really know. But in your scenario where they draft McCarthy, that would be the way that I would look at it is, look, it is a principle of mine that I always look at the logic of the pick and not try to predict whether it's going to work out or not, or think I know more about this prospect than the front office does and the intel and all those things. So we judge the positional value, what you gave up to get it, what the thought process was. And if their thought process was, this is the best fit with Kevin O'Connell, it's the best fit with Justin Jefferson, it's the best fit with their offense to potentially have a top 5 offense in the future, then that logic works out. And if Jaden Daniels becomes Dante Culpepper, except for with fewer turnovers, then I guess it happens. But, that's a scenario where it would be a debate for a long time, for sure. That would be one of those, we're arguing about that for absolutely ever until it's decided which one of those 2 quarterbacks works out. And it's not the craziest thing I've ever heard. Charlie says Dallas Turner is going to be special. I agree. I really, really enjoyed watching Dallas Turner this year. He's kind of a freak. and I'm a Bo Nix believer, so I like that option. I mean, the Bo Nix thing, what I keep coming back to is if that was the pick, Bo Nix is so good at executing an offense that and does have athleticism and ran for a lot of yards and was a good athlete, his whole career. It was really the part where it's throwing on time, throwing to the right places, but he developed that over the years. And I think that Bo Nix would have a good chance to step in right away and play right away as their first round pick. I don't know what the league thinks of Bo Nix, because when I watch him, I see the ball come out on time. And I've mentioned to you that this like thing for me that just works with my brain and watching football is when the ball comes out on time. And it's not just screens. Here's a stat for you that's kind of crazy I ran across about Bo Nix. When he was throwing over 20 yards, he average held on to the football only 3 seconds. That's like the NFL is dropping back and getting the ball out still under 3 seconds, even when you're throwing deep. That means you're processing quickly. And his numbers throwing over 10 yards were really good. So it is when you're trying to project the arm strength. No, I don't see Josh Allen there. I don't see a CJ Stroud thrower of the football, but it might be really important to O'Connell when you're talking about rhythm and timing. That just sounds like a fit. That's why you can't really talk me out of Penix and Nix if those guys are the pick, because both of them are good at throwing on time and getting rid of the football. So, I think that either one of those guys would be a fit. And with Dallas Turner or Byron Murphy, they need that. They need guys to work with. And I ran across a stat, but it applies for defensive tackles, applies for defensive ends, is most of them are drafted at the top if they're going to be special. And so, I think that if they came away with that, it would still be a thumbs up. It would still be an A for me. But I think it's more ideal to draft the guy at the top. I mean, just historically speaking, if you're drafting 23rd with a quarterback, there's more risk there than if you're drafting in the top 10. I mean, that's just sort of obvious, right? If you look at the charts of draft success for historical chart, it goes down with every pick. Like every pick is less valuable the farther you go. Just like a straight down, guys at the top, super valuable. Once you get past the top 15, it just goes right down. So if you're drafting a quarterback that is 23rd versus top 5, I mean, naturally there's going to be less chance that succeeds, but it's not like impossible that those guys could really work. I'm just making that point that when you're comparing these two, taking the guy at number 2 has much better odds, I think, than number 23, or at least somewhat better odds. I don't think the order really matters, but that's always when they're taken sort of toward the top. But I'd still be in support of it. I'm just sort of talking my way through it. Aaron says we can't worry about draft picks. Will anyone care about draft picks when May is a stud for the next 15 years? Well, 15 would be a very long career. But no one will ever be upset. Think about, let's see. I mean, even how about this? The Los Angeles Rams gave up a lot to get Jared Goff. I forget the exact trade, but they were picking 15th and they moved all the way up to number 1. So they gave up a ton to get Jared Goff. Jared Goff took them to a Super Bowl. Jared Goff led the number 1 offense in the NFL in 2017. Do you think the Rams were upset about drafting Goff? It wasn't even a 15-year quarterback, but they also used him to trade for another quarterback who won them the Super Bowl. So, I mean, no one is going to be upset if you give up an additional first-round pick if it works out. That the only concern is if it doesn't, of course, but if you pick them at 11, it doesn't work out, then it's a disaster. So that's always the case. It does make it harder though if it doesn't work out and then you don't have those other draft picks, but you're taking your shot. You're taking your shot to be great and not just good. Charlie says, can I interest you in Bo Nix at 11 and Jackson Powers Johnson at 23? The interior offensive line people are relentless and I respect it because it's been frustrating for a long time. I don't think that would be the pick that they would want to go after because they so badly need defense. And if we're ranking positional value, another thing is too that a lot of the quarterbacks that we're talking about have a little bit of scoot to them. So, if we're talking about Bo Nix, if we're talking about JJ McCarthy, Drake May, all these guys have some mobility. Drake May is tall. It becomes a little less important, I think, that you have great interior offensive line. And one of the biggest failures, and, this would go under the it's not all Kirk's fault thing, but one of the biggest failures of Rick Spielman is not realizing that tackles are less relevant to Kirk Cousins than guards because he takes the interior pressure and can't escape. He can step up in the pocket and he can escape the outside rushers, but the interior pressure was what always got him because he could not escape around the outside and he really wouldn't move outside of just like straight back and forth. And I'm sure that there's AI or whatever that has tracked this, that Cousins never moves left or right. And if you go back and look at the way that Sean Payton and the Saints built out their offensive line, center, guards, they always had humongous, beefy guards in the middle. And it was a big benefit to Drew Brees because he wasn't going to be able to run away when there was pressure. And I think that was a big failure. But if we're talking about the positional value of a guard or center in the first round, it's just too much in comparison to what a defensive tackle or what a defensive end is worth. And you could try to find those other guys. But I do think we saw this year, and this is just to make your point, and I wouldn't be upset about it, that this year we saw a big jump in the price tags for guards. So that is worth bringing up when we're talking about doing it this way. When we're talking about like building the interior offensive line through a draft pick, it's something that is worth bringing up how rare it is to get great linemen and how hard it is to get them because it's difficult to go find them in free agency now, when in the past, I think it was much easier. So I wouldn't be mad. I would not be mad if they got an offensive lineman because that would be something to see them actually putting together an interior that was reliable. And it is proof that we really only kind of watch, one team a lot, because when you go look at the grades, like on PFF for other offensive lines interiors, there's not too many that are amazing. Like, it's a very tough position in today's NFL now with the great defensive tackles and with all the blitzes that come. It's really, really hard to play guard. So maybe I just talked myself into your idea. I don't know. Bob says top 4 quarterbacks will be gone by 11. We think that's what everyone says. Maybe they're wrong. We thought that there'd be 4 in the top 10 last year, and there were only 3. And one guy was not actually a top prospect. So that's interesting, isn't it? Penix will be gone by 23. Again, we don't really know that for sure, but it would be very, very risky to wait until 23. That's what I think. It would be very, very risky to wait until 23 and just hope and hope and hope and sit there and go, don't take him. Don't take our guy. Don't take our guy. Let's see. JP says Broncos will almost certainly take a quarterback at 12. So then you have to sweat 12 more picks, including teams that decide to trade up, knowing the Vikings are drafting 23. Yeah, that's kind of the point is, aren't the Raiders in a position to draft a quarterback? And I saw this the other day. So I'm curious about this. I don't know if anybody else saw this. There's so much NFL insider stuff that goes on that it's hard to keep track of who said what, who reported what. But Ian Rappaport said something about the Broncos staying with Jared Stidham because Sean Payton can develop quarterbacks. And I was like, who exactly has Sean Payton developed as a quarterback? He got Drew Brees, and then Brees became great in New Orleans. But like Drew Brees was very, very good in San Diego before he got hurt. And that was one of the reasons that they moved on. They also picked Phillip Rivers, but he clearly was like very talented and a 2nd round draft pick. And then he became great. So that's one guy. And then I'm not, discounting that Sean Payton had a lot to do with it, but that's one guy. I mean, what, Ian Book? Like who else who are this long list of quarterbacks that Sean Payton developed? But it made me raise an eyebrow because I thought, wait, are the Broncos like not going to do this? Are they not going to draft a quarterback this year and roll with Jarrett Stidham because Sean Payton thinks that he is the guy who makes the quarterback? And never underestimate that. When I read the Seth Wickersham piece that Josh McDaniels thought that he made Tom Brady, I thought, well, anybody can think anything in this world with coaches. If that's the case, because Tom Brady made Josh McDaniels and not the other way around. And it's probably the case for Drew Brees. But if Denver is trying to put it out there to prepare their fans for their not drafting Bo Nix at number 12, that could leave the Vikings open. But Rappaport also said the Raiders are pretty much going to draft a quarterback. So yeah, waiting till 23 just seems so risky to me. Bruce says, this is what KOC was brought here for. He knows what he wants for his system. I'll trust him to go the right direction. For sure, I agree with that. Whoever Kevin O'Connell wants to argue for, I will say that's a good idea, even if I have differing opinions about what they do. If they pick McCarthy with Daniels on the board, I'm gonna have a tougher time with it because of Daniels' potential upside. But I also recognize that fit and circumstance are just everything when it comes to the success of a quarterback. And you could absolutely see JJ McCarthy becoming a star. So working directly with O'Connell over the next 5 years, yeah, I mean, you could see that working. So I would still give it an A, but I wouldn't give it an A plus. Put it that way. Any way in which they come away with a quarterback is between a B plus and an A plus to me, because it's their one and only massive need. Can't leave this draft without it. Let's see. Steve says Kwesi will give away too much compensation to move up and doesn't get enough to move down. Well, you don't know. I mean, he didn't give up too much to move up to 23. I thought the trade with Houston was fine. Did anyone have a problem with that? Remember his first draft? No, I don't remember. What happened? When was that? Did he have a draft? No one's brought it up. No one's brought it up. I don't remember what happened. I'll have to look it up. I'll use Google. It's just like Christian Ponder, where it's like the 2022 draft. We could just move forward with our lives here. We're in quarterback mode. We don't have to bring that up. It wasn't, and I'll say this. The trade down, it wasn't the compensation that was the problem. Different people had different opinions on that. Jimmy Johnson's chart not his chart, but the Jimmy Johnson chart didn't like it. Draft analytics charts liked it, whatever. The problem is you picked a guy who didn't work out. That's really what it is. And you picked a position that is not a premium position that you can find in free agency or that guys develop in regularly. That's really the problem with them moving down. And I didn't like it on draft night when they did it, but I don't think that it was like getting worked over in the exact compensation as much as people made it seem to be. It was more just the guys they used those draft picks on didn't work out. And if they did, it would have looked a lot better. I mean, if they had drafted Christian Watson or something, or whoever, I don't remember who was on the draft board, but if they drafted somebody else, but everybody talks about all the great players they could have got at 12, as if Jamison Williams has done anything, as if Jordan Davis is a difference maker. He's not. He played like 500 snaps last year. He's not a difference maker. So look, this is what makes the draft fun, is that we can always go through and say, you should have done this, you should have done that. But if we're using 2022's draft compensation to say that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah will get screwed in a trade up, I just don't see the connection there, because there was a lot of debate over whether that was a fine move or not, and really came down to just picking players who didn't work out. If they had, then it would look a lot better and you'd be fine with it. If Lewis Seen had become Josh Metellus, you'd be talking about how awesome that trade was, but he didn't. Could have with his talent, but he didn't. And by the way, in order to trade up to get a quarterback, you are getting screwed for sure. It's like a housing market where there's not much housing and everybody's getting screwed. And I, having bought a house recently, I know all about this, but that's always going to be the case. When everybody knows you're trading up to get a quarterback, you're going to overpay. Is anybody mad about overpaying if the guy works out? Nobody. Let's see. JJ will get paid mid-tier quarterback money, top tier making 50 plus a year, not the same. Or what are you talking about here? Let's see. Especially for the best player, this position totally worth. Oh, are we talking about? Oh, I see what you're talking about. You're talking about Justin Jefferson's contract. Yeah. When we're saying JJ, I'm getting confused by JJ's now. We're gonna have to work something out here to only call him Justin and call McCarthy JJ or something like that, because I'm getting all confused. When we're talking about Jefferson's contract, it's going to be expensive. But if your point was that it's not like paying a quarterback, you're 100% correct. It's not. His cap hits will not be what the best quarterbacks will be. And I promise you, when this happens, that his cap hits will not be intolerable until like 2026, 2027. And at that point, they will be able to restructure them and you'll all be fine. Tyler says, where would JJ McCarthy rank against quarterbacks the previous two draft classes? Well, we really only have to do one draft class because the 2022 draft class was a travesty. So of course, he's a better prospect than Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett was 24 years old and Jordan Addison just made him. I do not think that he's better than, so Bryce Young's hard because I didn't really love Bryce Young as a prospect. Thought he was disturbingly small when I saw him walking around the combine. I was like, okay, that's not like Russell Wilson jacked and super long arms and big hands small. That's just really tiny. But look, he could be great this year. I don't know. We'll find out. As a pure prospect, Bryce Young was considered a better prospect than JJ McCarthy. Of course, Stroud was, and I would say Anthony Richardson as well. I mean, Richardson did not have the statistics, but tools-wise, absolute freak show, like top-notch, plus character, leadership, all that stuff. And then showed last year, he came out and ran Indianapolis's offense right away. Fit with Shane Steichen. I mean, just like through the roof. So I don't think he was Anthony Richardson as a prospect. And I also don't think that he's as good as any of the top three as a pure prospect. So I guess that would put him in like 8th place. But Bryce Young was a way better prospect and hasn't worked out. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's not like a million miles away. I don't see him as a million miles away from these other guys, but I also have more questions about McCarthy and the high end than I have about some of the other ones. So, let's see. Jared says, I think Jaden Daniels is a horrendous fit for their scheme. It would be fun because it would be volatile. Well, he is a horrendous fit to play the role of Kirk Cousins. That I agree with. If they asked Jaden Daniels to be Kirk Cousins, then, oh my gosh, that would be a total disaster. And that he couldn't do that, but that's not what you would do. And Kevin O'Connell in that scenario would change what they were doing to play to Jaden Daniels' strengths. Now, you guys think he can't do that because of Josh Dobbs? Because a quarterback who showed up here in the middle of the season, that's just not. Now, I think they could have done better. I don't think your adjustment should be having the tight end pitch the ball to Josh Dobbs. That's one of the worst plays I've ever seen in my entire life. Maybe only second place to their trick play of throwing Kirk the ball in the playoff game. Those are the two worst plays I've ever seen in my entire existence for like decisions that you made before a game that you were going to do it. Terrible trick plays, throw out all the trick plays, never use them again. But if you start on draft day with designing your offense with Josh McCown and Kevin O'Connell to the things that Jaden Daniels does well, then yeah, I mean, it's going to look totally different than what you saw before. Aga says one more month of vague news reports. Yeah, welcome to the NFL, my friend. That is what we're working with here. But here's what I'd say about that. I've seen that take out there a few times. And here's what I think. Isn't this great though? Like, isn't this fun though? We get to be the people. We're not over here looking like, what is the Dwight Schrute meme where he's like looking out the window. We're not looking out the window at people having fun in the parking lot. We're in the parking lot. We're the ones who get to talk about quarterbacks for a whole month, knowing that they're going to take one. We get to run through all these scenarios. We get to watch all these quarterbacks and think about what they could be and talk about the possibilities of how to build around them and design systems for them and everything else. Is that better than talking about which guard you want? Which guard is going to suddenly make Kirk Cousins a different person? Oh, man. I was thinking about this today, like how Atlanta media is over there debating whether Kirk is worth it and not me. Like that's fun. So lean into it. Don't worry. Like look, a lot of draft analysts, I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't think that they have very good sources. You know why? Because proof, because of what happened. They don't mock draft well. They don't report well. None of that stuff. And I tend to think that most of the time they're just guessing like everybody else. But for the purposes of scenarios and for the purposes of having fun with this conversation leading up to the most exciting Vikings draft that I've ever covered, I am absolutely willing to talk about everything that comes out of these people's mouths, because why not? Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't you enjoy the next month leading up to this decision for the Vikings? Because most of football, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, most of football is talking about it and having fun talking about it. They only play 17 times a year. And if you have the best team in the world, they only play 21 times a year. So the rest of the time we talk about it. That's what makes it so fun. So I'm going to have a good time. And a lot of you are as well, having a good time talking about all these rumors and everything else. I like it. I like talking about the intel and could they do this? Are they still in it? Are they not still in it? Makes it very exciting. It's like the build. This is the best build up to anything the Vikings have had in a long time. Let's think about that just for a second. The build up to the Vikings playing the Saints in the Minneapolis Miracle game and the build up to Philly after would have to rank number 1 and 2. Although the opener, when I first got here in Minnesota to cover the Vikings for 1500 ESPN, when I first got here, the build up to week 1 with Teddy out, Sam Bradford is here. They're opening the stadium. Aaron Rodgers. Oh, I'm sorry. Week 2. Aaron Rodgers is showing up because Sean Hill won in week 1. Football, man. But so that build up to that week was wild. I mean, that was like really, really, tense. And how's Sam Bradford going to look? Is he going to start? Mike Zimmer was mad that it was reported he was going to start, and all this stuff happened. So that was something. And then the playoffs were something. And Kirk's first game, I think there was a lot of build up to that. The playoff game build up to New Orleans in 2019 was not significant because we thought they were going to get killed. They won, but I don't think anyone thought they were going to win. And San Francisco buildup was pretty big. And what since then? Maybe Vikings and Cowboys when the Vikings were 8-1 and then they got crushed. This ranks right there with those things. So I'm leaning into it. And judging by the size of the audiences, I think a lot of you folks were too. Ian says, if Anthony Richardson was Kwesi's guy last year, it makes some sense that Daniels would be Kwesi's guy this year. Similarities between their games. Yeah. Like, I think that Anthony Richardson was more sturdy, but I guess he got hurt in his first year. So things happen. You worry a little bit about how wild Daniels is. Daniels also is much older. So Anthony Richardson would have been a good draft stash for a year behind Kirk and then bring him in. So that is a difference between them, but playing styles, Daniels is a much more experienced and quality passer than Richardson, who is just a total cannon with a lot to work with, but a lot you need to work on. And Daniels is much more of a passer who could step in right away. That's a little difference. I mean, the frame is quite different between those two. But aside from that, your general point is totally correct. And I think what that tells you, if they were in on Richardson last year, it wouldn't just be Kwesi, it would be Kevin O'Connell as well, which would mean that he was comfortable with a running quarterback. I don't think he's ever not been comfortable. John says we really need to account for the coaching staff. Our team is in the best shape to train and develop quarterback. Coaching staff, receivers, tackles, they got everything. Somebody asked me this, how many scenarios would be better for any quarterback? And I couldn't think of any. Who would be better than what they have right here? Honestly, can't think of any. JP says, anyone seen Kurt Benkert, the Packers guy? Analysis on Bo Nix. Dude is underrated. Everybody's doing quarterback analysis now, huh? No disrespect to journeyman quarterbacks. Much love to journeyman quarterbacks. But yeah, I mean, look, every former quarterback who watches Bo Nix likes him. I don't know what that means because those guys are wrong all the time. I just know that when Kurt Warner, Chris Sims, Ben Kurt, anybody who watches him seems to love him. And here's the thing. So Mike says Nix is a product of the system, but NFL quarterbacks are products of systems. A lot of times, how many quarterbacks are truly systemless, truly unaffected by anything around them? Don't say even Patrick Mahomes, because they've had to make adjustments to their offense that flip to a short passing offense that helped Patrick Mahomes become what he is. Now, he's not a system quarterback. I mean, he certainly benefits from having one of the best offensive coaches who has ever been in the NFL in Andy Reid. I don't know of any quarterback who is just systemless, who you could just say, maybe Josh Allen's the closest thing. Plop them down, any team, any coaches. Hey, you get Urban Meyer and you get the Chiefs receivers from this year and go win the Super Bowl. Like, I don't know of too many guys who could do that. Kirk Cousins' success offensively over the last 2 years, Kirk Cousins is a system quarterback and always has been, and would probably, like, most everyone is a system quarterback anyway, but he has always very much been a product of what's around him, as most quarterbacks are. So that's not really a criticism to me. The thing with Bo Nix is, when you compare him to Drake May, Bo Nix, I think, has a limitation of how much he could do by himself to take you to that next level. So I'm talking a playoff game where things are going wrong. So I watched him against Washington. He played very well against Washington, but there were just times where it's like, well, Washington's a good team and things are going a little wrong, and he can't get you by himself to that next level. Everybody's a product of circumstance. Everybody's a product of system. And the best quarterbacks can take that and go something further. This is where I have a concern about McCarthy. Can McCarthy take you further, or I should say farther, than what the product of the system is giving you? So if the system and the team is a 10-win type of team, can you make it a 12-win type of team? Think about, and this is why you should look at quarterback wins, okay? I think that people misunderstand the quarterback wins, how you should use them. So the way I look at it is, for quarterback wins, what is the circumstance? What would that give you if you had the 16th best quarterback in the league versus your guy? So I've always thought that with Kirk Cousins, they were as many wins as those things gave him. Those are receivers, coaches, line, luck, those factors. If you get all those things, receivers, line, luck, whatever, in 2022, and the luck factor is turned up to 10, and the receivers are turned up to 10, and your coaching is better, then you can get 13 wins. But that's what you need to get there. And if those things are down, then you will miss the playoffs with Kirk Cousins. What you're looking for is, if you are a 10-win team with all those factors I named, you win 12. And my example for that is Peyton Manning. That Peyton Manning won, he's the greatest, obviously. He won 11 to 15 games every single year. So when they didn't have good luck, when they had injuries, when they had bad whatever coaching, he still would win 11 games. And then if they were good, defense, obviously, I should mention that, defense. But then when they were good, he won 15 and he could win the Super Bowl. That's what the great quarterbacks do. That's what you're looking for. Is JJ McCarthy capable of taking a 10-win team to 12 or 13? Is Drake May? I could see it much more. Let's see. I'm scrolling. You guys have a lot of takes. Well, I'm way behind. I have fallen way behind. What's up with the weird border on the video? I'm trying new things, man. If you don't like it, let me know. I've been screwing around with this program and trying to figure out new things. I thought it was kind of fun, but if you don't like it, then you guys can tell me you don't like it. This is false. Billy the Kid says Knicks threw go routes or screens, nothing else. I mean, it's just not true. Mr. Kid, just not true. When you look up the numbers as an intermediate passer, from 10 to 20 yards, he had a 94 PFF grade and put up huge numbers on the intermediate passing. There is no, you couldn't throw for 80% completion percentage, 4,400 yards, 45 touchdowns just on screens. It's just he threw a lot of short passes. It was a 28% behind the line of scrimmage. That's a big number for sure. And that does concern me that they thought that was the best option. They also had great playmakers, but when he was asked to throw down the field, he was really excellent at doing so. And, you can look up the numbers. They're right there on pff.com, but to say he wasn't going through progressions, I think, well, first of all, let's be honest about college football. Let me even reverse. PFF had this stat a few years ago that about 60 to 70% of NFL quarterbacks throw to their first read. On 60 to 70% of plays, depending on the quarterback throws to his first read. And so that tells me that the goes through the progressions thing is important, but maybe a little bit on the overrated side. And college football is just T-ball. It's putting it on a tee and hitting it. And everybody has that. Everybody has putting the ball on the tee and hitting it in college football. The defensive players are terrible in comparison to the NFL. The defensive minds are not in the same caliber as someone like Brian Flores. You got more time to throw the football. You got schemes that work on short passes. There's all sorts of stuff that is so much easier in college football. We can always do that. We can always say, oh, the guy, and this is not me coming to say that he's a great quarterback. It's just that that's always a criticism for absolutely everybody. I really think that that's just this Bo Nix criticism. I think the better way to look at Nix is what's the upside? That's the thing. So what is the upside? Is the upside someone who needs everything right? Or is the upside a franchise quarterback who can overcome, who can make an 8-win team, a 10-win team? I don't know that Bo Nix is that guy. I don't think that he is. So that's why I look at it that way. I don't think he can't. I think the best thing he does is see the field and get rid of the football. Marty says, is it a coincidence that the Vikings have had trouble for many years finding a franchise quarterback and never taken one in the top 10? No, it is not. It's not a coincidence. It's not, Marty, it's not just that they haven't taken them in the top 10. They haven't taken them, period. I mean, what is it? Is it only Tommy Kramer, Dante, Teddy, and Ponder? Is that it for the whole history of the Vikings for first-round quarterbacks? I mean, you're not – I'll say it a million times. You don't win the lottery unless you play. Well, you certainly have not played very often. So, yeah, I mean, no, it's not a coincidence that the Vikings haven't drafted quarterbacks, and that's why they haven't gotten that franchise quarterback. That's exactly why. Because, Drew McGarry brought this up on the show the other day. Really fun conversation if you want to go back and take a look at that. But he brought this up that it's always somebody else's quarterback. It's always someone for the Vikings that another team decided they were fine with getting rid of. That's Sam Darnold, right? That's Sam Bradford. That's Case Keenum. That's going back. It's Matt Castle. It's no matter who it is through the years, it's always somebody that when Brad Johnson came back, right? Brad Johnson was a draft and developed quarterback for the Vikings, but it's Randall Cunningham, it's Jeff George, it's all guys that some other team said, you know what? I don't really want this. You take it. And then the Vikings use their receivers to try to make the most of it. So that to me is something that is one of the reasons they've not had this guy. And even with Kirk Cousins, another franchise said that they didn't want to pay Kirk Cousins. All right, let me scroll. You guys have been talking in the comments quite a bit here, and I love that. Let's see. Okay, some people like the border, like that. Good. I'm glad you do. I'm just trying different things, different, camera angles, different whatever. I just have, it's the off season for me trying to figure this out because now I've had this big audience come to the YouTube. Thank you. Great to see you and great to meet people who are new to the show. I feel like I should read my bio of where Purple Insider came from for the new audience every show, but purpleinsider.com is a good place to go to check out everything, including my writing. So Boyd says, what is wrong with Penix for the quarterback? I mean, if they take him, then I'll be totally fine with it. I have liked Michael Penix the entire time. I think that his arm strength is special, and I think that his character is special. And every time I bring him up, people will tell me he was injured. I am familiar with that. I am also aware that a lot of people get injured in football, and that doesn't mean that they will have a terribly short career. How about the number of times Aaron Rodgers got hurt throughout his career? And Kirk Cousins was healthy the entire time, but then suddenly got hurt. Like that happens. People have surgeries. People have season-ending injuries. This is how it goes. And if the medical people are comfortable with where he's at, excuse me. Sorry, I had to fight off a sneeze there. If the medical people are comfortable with where he's at, then you take your shot at him. And I think he'd be a really great fit. I mean, if Kevin O'Connell wants the ball out on time with velo into tight windows sometimes with a guy who's willing to throw it, that's Michael Penix. If he doesn't need the guy to scramble all over the place, that's okay. I mean, you can win from the pocket. You can definitely win from the pocket. We got a Bob Greasy mention as a system quarterback. So, I mean, look, everyone, you're telling me Ben Kurt's good. Okay, well, that's good. I'll check him out. I'll check out his YouTube page. Not every journeyman quarterback's opinions on quarterbacks are always good, but I'll check them out. So it's just, the system, like whoever's going to play here is going to be a system quarterback, and 80 to 90% of plays will be system plays, but it's the other 10% that really makes the difference. That's the thing about it. Let's see. We've got classic comps here from Tony Tiger. Jaden Daniels, more Anthony Richardson, Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson, Michael Vick, Cordell Stewart, maybe sensing a trend there, but you are right about those are the running quarterbacks. But I don't see much similar to Richardson and Newton or Jackson or Vick or Stewart when it comes to the throwing in college. Daniels' success throwing the football in college is really prolific for this year, and none of those guys actually had that. All of those guys needed major development in the NFL as passers in order to be as great as they became. Or Richardson, we'll see how it works out. But that's why I look at Jaden Daniels as, and so you mentioned McCarthy as being Goff, yes. Cousins, maybe. Steve Young, no. He's not like Steve Young. I think actually Jaden Daniels is more like Steve Young. Steve Young was a running quarterback until he got really old, and then he did it less. But from his foundation of first emerging with the 49ers, that dude was a playmaker. And if you go watch the 80-yard touchdown or whatever it was against the Vikings, he was a scrambler. He even talked about this last year, that he identifies himself with the Lamar Jacksons of the world, because he was talking about this when Lamar won the MVP. He was saying, I see myself as being like a Lamar Jackson back in the day. And that's true if you watched him back then. I just, Jaden Daniels obviously falls in a bucket, right? But is he to not use all of the same exact type of quarterback? Is he more of a Josh Allen, who doesn't throw the ball on time all the time? He doesn't have the arms talent that Allen has. So he's a little more a precision passer than he is on time or howitzer or whatever, that kind of thing. But he's accurate and he doesn't turn the ball over. So that's something that he really has going for him. But as far as his actual impact with his legs, it's really significant. It is on the level of the guys you mentioned. That's the important part of your comp. And I know we can't find perfect comparisons for everybody, but the important part is those quarterbacks you named, they had flaws and they all won a bleep ton of games. All of it, like Vic was not perfect. He wasn't the best, like sit in the pocket quarterback. Cam Newton at times was not the most accurate. These guys won a ton of games. And that's why with Daniels, you could see that floor being very high because he can make such an impact with his running game. Dave says Brock Purdy's a system quarterback that's working out pretty well so far. There's like Jared Goff is playing with an assistant. There's nobody who's not. I mean, man, if you just like rolled the ball out there and told the quarterback to go figure it out, they would be in all sorts of trouble because no one could do that. Eddie says these draft experts also had Mahomes going in round 2 and late round 1. Sound familiar? JJ is this year's Mahomes. So I didn't see the last part of that coming. I truly didn't. But you are right that when it comes to the expertise, we're all guessing. Is McCarthy this year Mahomes? No, that does not prove anything. But he could be better than I think. His ceiling could be higher than I think. And that's why I would so much support the Vikings drafting him, even if I have these questions. Percent odds you could do a collab with QB School. Yeah, with JT O'Sullivan. Yeah, I'll reach out to him at some point. I'm waiting until we get a little bit closer, but for sure, I'll reach out to JT and see if he could come on the show. Definitely. What about Bob says, do you see the Vikings maybe trading with Arizona this week for number 4 once they liked McCarthy in the private workout? This could be the week. Yes, this could be the week. Yep. Sorry, I'm laughing at one of the comments, but because the owners meetings, I mean, everybody's going to be in the same spot. So if they're trying to solidify like one of these trades, then this could be the week. Sorry, this was what I was laughing at. Tony Tiger saying, I love how every episode is Collar saying that nobody knows anything and nothing matters. So the first part is true. And that's just history, man. I've been doing this now for a long time. And one thing I'm certain of is that nobody knows anything. I think that's what makes it so much fun, is because we talk about these things. And just like with football games, everything works this way in sports, right? We talk about them and we give our opinions and we give our perspectives. And you see Bo Nix different than I see Bo Nix. And you see Michael Penix different than I see him, or JJ McCarthy. And then we all talk about it. And then we get to draft night. And this is why everybody loves it so much. And then we find out what all these teams thought of these guys. And then we have the biggest opinions ever, even though we don't know. And then we go to training camp and then we start to know. About third, fourth week of training camp, we start to know. Or in Kellen Mond's case, like right away in rookie minicamp. But most of the time, you start to know in training camp. And then as we go through, we find out. So if you like Netflix shows, it's kind of like you start a Netflix show and nobody knows the characters and you don't know where it's going to go. And then as it plays out, we get to watch it unfold and we talk about it. So that's what we do here. That's why I like it. But just factually speaking, if you give me a draft analyst, an insider, I will easily, within about 30 seconds, go tell you all the times they mocked or reported something that did not happen on draft night. It's a very difficult job. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm trying to go on that when there's reports and things like that, we can only talk about what that might mean, but not take anything as like the fact of the fact. I'm not trying to like rail on people. I'm just saying that the guys who do that are not very accurate. And so we take what they throw out there and we talk about, hey, if this is right, then how's it going to work? That's my approach to it, as opposed to saying, oh, well, that's a fact, because it just hasn't always been factual. Teams put a lot of stuff out there that is on purpose to try to mislead, and they do a good job of it. Let's see. Taylor says, I think the hope with McCarthy is you're getting him a year early. Had he gone back to college, maybe he would have taken a huge leap. Now, that's a totally fair point, Taylor, because that's Bo Nix. That's Jaden Daniels. That's Michael Penix, although Penix was good for 2 years. But, I mean, that's what they're banking on, is that his character and his arm strength and his quickness and all those things, they all matter to his development over the next year. And if he had gone back to college, then maybe he develops and maybe he dominates and puts up 40 touchdowns. With all statistics, we just can't superimpose what we have into what we don't have, right? And this goes for, hey, what if Kirk was playing for this team? This always used to happen. And I'm like, I don't know. What if Kirk was playing for San Francisco? I don't know. We can only work with the stats that we have. We can only work with what we have with McCarthy. But if the Vikings go for it, one of the justifications and one of the best reasons is that they're assuming that you're right, that they would be looking toward the future and what he's going to become. And they can probably project that better than I can. I can only work with what I know right now, which is that there are some limitations there. And there's certainly a guy who has never dealt with a lot of adversity in the NFL, well, no one's dealt with adversity like the NFL. That's a hard part of college, but like not at all. I mean, he's just done nothing but win and win and win. So there's going to be a learning curve there that's pretty significant for him. But you make a fair point. If he had played to the same age, this goes for Drake May. You could say this for Drake May. If Drake May played for Alabama instead of Jalen Milroe, is that his name? He's national champion, right? Or at least right on the doorstep. I mean, so we always have to do that. That's one of the reasons that we fail so often with the draft, is that there's all this information we don't have. Reg says, who signs first, JJ or CeeDee Lamb? Don't know. I do not know. I think JJ is going to push it all the way to the end of training camp, but I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I don't know when Justin Jefferson's going to sign. Both of them deserve to make super big time money, and they probably will. And that's the best I can do. But I don't know. I don't know what CeeDee Lamb's situation is or where he stands or whatever, but maybe they're playing a little game of chicken there, or maybe they both know around the same amount and it won't have any impact. I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, if Lamb signs first, then we're going to have a pretty good number to work with as far as projecting Jefferson. So do the Vikings want, and for a team that has so much money, Dallas, I think they're not always like the biggest spenders sometimes. I mean, they really sat out this free agency. So are they going to try to fight it out with CeeDee Lamb? Remember, they fought it out with Dak Prescott and ended up kind of looking silly. So will they do the same thing with CeeDee Lamb? I don't know. Let's see. Dana says Colin Cowherd compared McCarthy to the guy who just left. Thoughts? Well, look, okay. So one thing is, if you had Kirk Cousins on a rookie quarterback contract, probably would have been pretty good result, right? They probably could have won more. I think there's always going to be the limitations to Cousins' game that stop them deep in the playoffs, but they would have had stronger teams. They would have had a better chance. But the difference is that McCarthy is a much better athlete than Kirk Cousins. One of the problems with Kirk Cousins for his entire career is that he's just not very athletic. Now, compared to me or you, he looks like Hakeem Olajuwon. But compared to Josh Allen, compared to Mahomes, compared to the best quarterbacks in the league, he is, and there's objective measures for this that are becoming harder to use for quarterbacks because they don't participate in the combine. But Kirk Cousins, I remember looking this up. There's a thing, if you guys have never heard of it, called relative athletic score, which takes all of your combine performances and weighs the different factors that are most important to that position and then creates a percentile of athleticism. It's not a perfect measure, but it kind of gives you this general idea of what type of athlete your quarterback is. So Anthony Richardson broke the system and Cam Newton was 99th percentile. I think he had the highest score ever. So you can kind of get the idea, right? And Kirk Cousins was, I believe, the lowest in the NFL except for Nick Foles. He scored in the 40-somethingth percentile as far as starters go. And Nick Foles wasn't really a starter. And that always was something that was hard to overcome. And JJ McCarthy, just based on his 3-cone, just based on his velocity for throwing and watching him play and watching him do athletic things, like that's a much better athlete than Kirk Cousins. That's a top notch. Now, it's not the same level of athleticism as Anthony Richardson or some of the other great quarterbacks, but it's a top notch athletic quarterback that is going to be able to make plays, that's going to be able to, roll out and things like that. So, yeah, Preston says all the experts know nothing. It's tough. Look, there's a lot of great draft analysts. We have one on the show, Chris Trapasso. And what I love about Chris Trapasso is that, and a lot of draft analysts are this way, they watch the guys and they tell you what they think and they chart them and they grade them and they try to find out as much as they can. And they give you their takes and the information that they've gathered about them. And they can paint a picture of what someone can and can't be. And they do it in an honest way. I think anybody who claims that they know more and that they are the best guy at predicting outcomes or something, that's where you got to be wary. Or if they have too much intel, you got to be wary, because no one has intel, not real intel for what's going to happen. If they did, they would get more than 7 out of 32 picks in the first round or something. So if there's someone who's claiming to have a lot of sources, I'm skeptical. And if there's someone who is, if there's someone who's not able to give you like detailed information about guys and admit that, it might work out or might not. And then there's also a lot of copy and pasters. There was a thing that was out there from Grinding the Mocks that showed that when Daniel Jeremiah or Dane Brugler put something out there, that all the mocks follow them. So there's a lot of follow the leader. There's a lot of groupthink when it comes to it. Sorry, did I read this? Oh, about Brock Purdy. Yeah. Sorry, I only read the first part of it. Yeah, Brock Purdy's a good example of a guy that slips through the cracks because he's 6 feet tall and he is quick but not fast. But could like JJ McCarthy comp, and it's maybe 2 right in front of me, but he kind of, you want him to play like Brock Purdy, only a little more athletic. But Purdy's a good runner. He's got quick feet. He can make a play. He's got a lot of intelligence. He throws the ball the right place, but he's gutsy and he's willing to take a shot. Like all those things, like if that's your system quarterback who can add that extra element that when he needs a run for 20 yards in the NFC Championship, he can get it. That's what you're looking for. So, the system quarterback thing it's something that kind of drives me crazy, because everybody has to have some form of system that they're playing within, and then it's how much you can do outside of it. But yeah, I never really addressed the Kirk comparison. I just don't think that he's like Kirk, really. I think that what the Kirkian part is that like he can throw on the run, which Kirk was actually quite good at. If he was rolling out on a bootleg, he was really good at like kind of flipping the hips, making that throw. And, I guess pocket quarterback, like I just don't really see it, because the thing about Cousins is we have seen him in his prime. We did not see him when he was 21 years old. He's nowhere close to McCarthy at 21 years old. Otherwise, he would have been a first-round draft pick. What Kirk became over the years is probably the best evidence for quarterback development, that if you have the right mindset and you're an obsessive freak about being a great quarterback, that you can get there if you've got that natural ability to throw the football. And so, I think that with Kirk compared to McCarthy, it's like, well, I don't know, man. Give me 9 years. I mean, when did Kirk show up here? At age like 29 or 30? So I only know that version of watching him super closely, but I think that the athleticism is different. And I think that the upside is a little bit higher. But of course, I mean, when it comes to Kirk Cousins, like he was a very, very, very accurate quarterback, and he really, really knew football. And that's going to take time for JJ McCarthy to get there. He was a backup to start. He did have to develop for years. So Preston says, I just want Dante back. Knee injury ruined our role. I mean, yeah. I think about what that team became over the few years after Dante got hurt. by 2009, Dante still would have been in his prime if he hadn't got hurt. And that team was really starting to come together. Plus, the ownership change was huge. I think the Wilfs really got the organization together. People forget when Dante was playing what a bleep show it was. Don't know how to pronounce your name. Sorry. How do you think that the Cowboys defense will do under Zimmer? I think they'll be really good. Really good. I mean, I think they'll be one of the 5 best defenses in the NFL. There's a lot you could say about Mike Zimmer, but the man is really brilliant when it comes to coaching defense, and they have a ton of talent. And they're going to be better against the run. They brought in Eric Hendricks, who I think can still play a little bit, certainly for Zimmer. So, yeah, I think look, Dallas is going to go into another year where they have Super Bowl contender written all over them and probably will disappoint at the end of the day. But their defense, I promise, will not get run on, at least with their talent. Look, if it was 2020 Vikings, then they would have gotten run on like this. But with their talent, they will not get steamrolled in the playoffs in the same way. And I think him working with Trayvon Diggs is potentially something really special. Let's see here. Joshua says that's why we picked JJ. He can run and throw, and he has a running back in Jones and the best wide receiver duo plus a tight end. That's exactly why you pick JJ McCarthy, is because if he has all these things around him and he can execute the offense at a high level and understand a lot of things, the mental part of this is so underrated. It's so underrated. Like Patrick Mahomes, it's so underrated how brilliant he is at football in his mind, at reading and understanding where the football goes, because most of his throws are that, and then he does something freakish. But most of the time, he is executing that offense. And chemistry with his tight end is certainly helpful, and you want that from your quarterback. But so much is above the years. Think about, like, you have 2.5 seconds. So I'll give you an example. I was watching Sam Darnold the other day, and I was watching back his tape from 2022. And there's a play where Darnold is on a straight drop back, and he has a post from the receiver on his left side coming in the middle of the field. And it looks like the middle of the field is going to be vacated because a safety dropped down. And it looks like it's going to be one-on-one coverage. But what he doesn't see and doesn't process is that when there's no safety at all in the middle of the field, he's probably out there somewhere unless it was a blitz. And so he doesn't realize that, I think it was Tyrann Mathieu maybe, was actually on the other side and had come back to the middle of the field, and he lets it go. And it's the easiest interception you'll ever see, because he did not process that if the guy was a robber safety, and I'm trying to remember this play, but a robber safety coming down, somebody else is going to fill that spot. They're not just leaving the hole unless it's a cover zero. They're not just leaving the whole secondary wide open. He did not process that quick enough and threw an interception. It's probably the reason why Sam Darnold, because it's not physical. He's got incredible skill. So McCarthy, this is his strength. This is supposed to be the biggest, number one thing that JJ McCarthy has going for him, is that he has a great mental processing ability. And whether that translates to the NFL the way it's supposed to, that I'm not sure. But can you get a sense for that if you're O'Connell? Yeah, I think you can, if you're sitting down with him in a room, that you can get. And usually when they do private workouts, they give guys, like, I'm going to read you a play, then you got to call the play, then 45 minutes later, you got to remember the play. But it's not easy to figure these things out, whether that will actually translate. But I think that's one of his biggest strengths. JC says, I still like Drake May better. Me too. I mean, the upside of that man's arm is just really impressive. Really impressive. And that's where, we see with someone like Josh Allen that, when he has the arm strength, even if he mistakes something, and that's like room for error, right? Room for error is Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Let's say that Josh Allen misreads something. Whoops, I misread it and I threw it anyway. And it was a completion, because it doesn't matter, because I throw the ball that freaking hard. Or, whoops, I misread something at the line of scrimmage. Let me run for 20 yards. Or in Josh Allen's case, maybe 50 yards. I mean, how many times we saw Mahomes do it in 2 Super Bowls? Mahomes has taken off with his legs and made plays. 2 Super Bowls to win them on final drives. You need that. You can't just sit there in the pocket and win a lot of times. Most quarterbacks can't. I mean, Goff is probably the closest that it gets to recently, right? Other than Brady. Brady doesn't count. That's the GOAT. That's totally different story. Sue says, trade up for May or stick and pick with JJ at 11. That is the thing that we're not 100% sure that the NFL wants to take him in the top 5. We don't know that. But if you try to stick and pick and JJ's your guy, McCarthy, and no one else is, then you get yourself into what you really don't want. And this would only be behind the scenes, but what you really don't want is any situation where Kwesi Adofo-Mensah tries to get cute and doesn't get Kevin O'Connell as guy. That's the biggest fear. If you end up landing somebody with like the 23rd pick that O'Connell is kind of feeling that he is stuck with, then that's not what you want. So you're looking to have them both very much on the same page, 100% all in on one quarterback. That's what you're looking for. So that would be my concern with Penix or Nix. Mahomes ran a 4.81 40, so you don't have to be super fast. You know what I've learned about that is it's really about a playmaking mentality as much as it is pure speed and also quickness. And this is where I like McCarthy, is that 3-cone sounds silly to focus on it, but he does have very quick feet. I remember a play where he scored against the Gophers where it looked like someone had cut him off to run into the end zone, and he just like turned it up real quick and got by that guy to the edge and scored a touchdown. I was like, yeah, that's quickness. Quickness is much better than just like, well, not much better. It's probably more important than 40 time. Like the whole 40 is being quick and having escapability and then being able to get out. Because once you have that mentality, and that's where I'm really talking about, because if you don't have that mentality, you end up like Alex Smith. Alex Smith was fast, but he didn't have that mentality. And that's what I do worry about a little bit with McCarthy, where someone like Daniels, someone like May, they are natural runners. They will drop back. Oh, I don't see it. I'm going to make a play. I'm going to go run. Sometimes to their detriment, but that is who they are. And that's Mahomes. Mahomes is playmaker by any means. I'm going to make a play. And I don't know if that's quite as natural to McCarthy, but he can definitely get, and hey, look, you're bringing up, Christian Ponder and his 40 time. And that's what I mean exactly, is that Christian Ponder was a great athlete, but he didn't use it. Josh McCown is a great athlete and he didn't use it. You need someone who's going to use it. That's what you really need, is somebody who has that natural playmaking ability to want to use it. So anyway, well, this has been a great chat. And yeah, Joe says, shouldn't you be streaming from the airport, catching an early flight out? I'm a little nervous, Joe. I'm a little nervous. I'm flying out tomorrow afternoon, and I am concerned about the situation with the flight. I was looking up the weather for tomorrow, and at least in the Twin Cities, it doesn't look like it's supposed to be completely crushing the Twin Cities by the time I'm headed out. That's my hope. But I moved up my flight so I could try to make sure that, like, even if it gets delayed, they have to, I don't know, de-ice the plane or something, that, it should be okay. But we didn't have a winter, so who can complain? But I'm trying to get to the owners' meetings here, and we're going to talk with, Kevin O'Connell on the record on Tuesday. Some other stuff going on Monday. So, I want to get down there on time. And plus, I've already got scheduled a few people that I'm going to meet up with for podcasts and things like that. I'm excited about it. Like, this is my first time going to the owners' meetings is the first time that I've actually needed to. So JP says, is there any info who the Vikings will send to LSU and NC's pro day? Why did Kevin and Kwesi back down from Michigan's pro day? Well, it might have been because they already had a private workout scheduled with him, reportedly. But I also have never made a whole lot of that. Like, just who goes where, that sort of thing. Am I going to the draft? I am not. I will be streaming from right here during the draft. There really isn't, for a reporter, there isn't much to do at the draft. It's actually better if you are at TCO Performance Center or talking to you guys. And in previous years, what I've done is on night one, I've done a live stream. And then on night two, I usually go out to, do the press conferences with the coach and GM and so forth. And, we'll kind of go from there. But I'm working out the plan. So I'll be here, but people will be dropping in. So like, Will Raggett, Dane Mizutani, maybe we'll get Kevin Seifert on here, Andrew Kramer. Like, we'll have different reporters from TCO dropping in and so forth, in the lead up to the draft. It's going to be really fun. I mean, I'm really excited about it. I wish that we didn't have to wait this long. I wish that we could do this, quicker, like get right to it after free agency, but that's how it goes. So anyway, Sue says, if KOC identifies May as the guy and the Patriots are asking for our first rounders this year and 2 more future firsts, I'm taking the trade and won't think of it. Sometimes you have to be like, bleep them picks. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do. You just have to say bleep them picks. Just how it goes sometimes. And so anyway, well, that is all in the rumor breakdown for this evening. I do have to, I'm hosting on WCCO radio tomorrow morning with Pete Najarian. So I'm going to do that. Got to prepare for that, and then got to pack to head out tomorrow. So lots of stuff to get going on for me. And I think there's still basketball on. So I'm going to go watch that as well. So you guys have a great time. Have a great time. With this whole thing. That's my advice, I guess, is like, there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out and reports and rumors and whatever else about the Vikings. And we're going to have fun with all of it. I'm going to try to bring you as many perspectives as I can when it's down at the owners meeting. So great stuff from everybody in the comments, except for one person. You know who you are, and you need to stop doing that, because I'm going to figure out the block button and I'll get you then. But everybody else, great stuff. Really, really appreciate the chats. I mean, you guys make this super, super, super fun for me to come on here and do that. So appreciate all you guys. And the next time you see me, I hopefully will be in Orlando. And if I'm not, then well, that means the snow got me and life happens, but hopefully I'll be down there. So thanks everybody. Take care.